I think it's probably more than past time that we start talking about Stormrise, because I really did love this book, and I wanna talk more about what went into it. So I'm trying to think if there's any preface question I wanna put in here. If we just want to get straight to it, yeah, well, you know what? One question I do want to ask before we talk pure Stormrise is you had published your essays for moms, or essays about momming.
Yes.
And then you had published Agent Demystified, which was an absolutely wonderful guide to how to find an agent, everything you needed to know for getting your feet wet. Having had that experience when it came to your fiction, and we're talking 12 years, and I know that God said, eventually I'll lead you on the path to Middle Grade Ninjas podcast and all the rest. But during that time, was there never a temptation to just self-publish your books?
There wasn't. And the self-publishing industry is very different now from when I did it. So I think it's a lot better now than it was. But after my experience with it, the one thing I knew I wanted for my next book was distribution. And that's one thing that you just don't get when you self-publish. I wanted my book to be on bookshelves in Barnes & Noble and Borders at the time, which I'm still grieving the loss of, and libraries. I wanted my book to be in libraries. And so when you get a contract with a publisher, they have the means to get your book out there in the different places. So I knew that I wanted that. And so that's one of the things that's important to me as an author. And it's just been thrilling to me, for people have been sending me pictures of Stormrise. Oh, look, it's in my library. Oh, look, it's in my bookstore. And I love that because I wanted it to fly free into the world and to know that it's out there. And I didn't have to do a thing, I just wrote it and it's out there. And it's not that my first book wasn't available. It was completely available through Ingram. Anybody could have ordered it at any time, but there was no visibility. It wasn't out there on any shelves. And the only shelves it was on was a local bookstore that I went in and said, hey, will you put my book on your shelves? Because that's what you do. So I think that in the future, if I were ever to do some more nonfiction writing, I would be more inclined to self-publish, probably digitally. It's so easy to do that. And I would probably do that. But right now I'm just very content having a traditional publishing contract.
Well, now that you've got it, your book is out in the world. Is it everything you thought you would be? Everything that was worth working for all these years?
It really was. It really was. It was magical.
Well, no more teasing. Let's get to it. Let's talk about Stormrise. So for those people that haven't had a chance to read it yet, but are ordering their copies as they're listening to this, give them an overview. What is Stormrise about?
Stormrise is about a young girl named Rain, who's 17, and she lives in a society where it's not very cool to be female. And when the story opens, there is a conscription. One male from every household needs to go fight in the army. And Rain has a twin brother named Storm, who is mentally disabled because of a sickness when they were infants. And so she takes his place, dresses as a boy, so that her brother does not have to go off and fight and most likely be killed. In so doing, she buys some dragon powder, which helps her with her disguise, and she inadvertently awakens the sleeping dragons of old.
And I wanted to ask you about, a lot of things, but thinking about, well, heck, now I've lost the question. I was all excited to ask it, and it's gone. Yeah, no, it really is gone. I wanted to ask you about Storm, but I can't remember what specifically I wanted to ask. Let's move on. Let's talk instead about, let's talk about dragons, because that fascinates me because we know dragons are coming into the story. We know that there is a dragon on the cover. we know for sure before this book's over, we better get dragons. I've been promised in the description on the cover. If I get to the end, here comes my angry email and my 1-star review on Amazon. So why? No, just kidding, authors. I would never do that. I'd think it, but I wouldn't do it. So why was it important to start this in a world where there's some reason not to believe in dragons prior to their arrival?
That's a good question. I don't think in the beginning I was consciously making that decision, but as I was developing the story, I felt that it would be stronger if Rain had to overcome her own disbelief in order to accept that the voice that she's hearing is actually a dragon. If she had grown up believing in them, it would have been so easy. And you never want things to be easy for your protagonist, right? So she had to overcome a lifetime of believing the dragons are just myths. So, and it made her personal struggle harder. So that's what I needed for her.
Gotcha. And unless you mentioned that this is a society that's not cool with women, extremely not cool with women. I think what it's that they get killed immediately if they're found impersonating a man, so they can purchase property or anything that you might want to do. And obviously our own society is hostile toward women, but not. I'm going to go ahead and give us credit that we're a little bit ahead of the characters in your novel. Maybe not as much as I'd want for us to be, but a little bit. So why was it important for you to have that environment? Does that just come back to creating as much conflict for your protagonist as possible, or?
Yep, it's the same thing. I mean, if it would have been no big deal for her to dress as a boy, then there would have been not as much risk. And she needed to take a great risk. The choice that she made was out of a fierce love and loyalty for her family. And so in order to make that more compelling, there needs to be a level of risk and sacrifice involved. And so, a threat of possibly being killed is pretty risky. So that just seemed to work.
Yeah, no, early on, every restroom break, I'm holding my breath. They're going to find out.
I can't tell you how many restroom scenes I deleted. I think I over the top with the bathroom scenes. Yeah. I had one early reader say to me, "Wow, she really pees a lot." I'm like, okay, I think I better pull back a little here. Yeah.
Need to add extra scenes of her purchasing big gulps everywhere she goes.
Oh my!
And it's kind of fun because typically that's just you cut those scenes. Nobody in books or on TV ever goes to the bathroom unless every time she does, she could potentially be exposed and I assume instantly killed.
Yeah.
I don't know if they bother with a little trial first or if it's just all right. Is that fire hot enough? Here we go.
We'll never know. We'll just never know.
Well, no spoilers. Maybe the book ends with Rain dying. I don't want to spoil it for potential readers. And so, what with a world like this, where it's there, I felt like there were familiar bits of DNA from other fantasy worlds and tropes, of course, which. Obviously, do you want a fantasy story that's going to be like the fantasy stories you love, or don't you? But sure. What world specifically did you pull from? Were there any specific books or any specific societies that informed how you created yours?
There's always a lot of things, of course, that I pull from. I really love the girl dressing as a boy trope. In fact, there is a tiny shout out in Stormrise to Éowyn, who is my favorite character from Lord of the Rings. Now you're going to go back and look for it, aren't you? It's in there.
No, I caught it.
Oh, well, of course you did.
I'm a book nerd, madam. I'm aware.
I can't even think that you didn't see that. My humblest apologies. So yes, there's that. Yes, there's a Mulan vibe. Yes, there's an Arya Stark vibe. Although, to be honest, I hadn't even started watching Game of Thrones until I had written Stormrise. I read the first book many years ago and decided I didn't want to read the rest. And now I'm like, wow, I didn't read the rest because Game of Thrones. But so when it comes right down to, if we're talking tropes, I really enjoy that trope and playing with it. But in saying that, what's also important to me is that for Rain, she found her strength not because she dressed as a boy, but in spite of it. She found her strength in her authentic self, that she learned that her strength was always there as a female. And to me, that's important, not that she didn't have to set aside who she was, because society demanded it. She just was given the freedom to do what she needed to do when she was disguised. So that's just important to me,
Is there a little bit, and probably not a lot, but is there a little bit of identification on your part as Authoress Anon for so many years that, yes, if you could become somebody else, you could do something like this?
Isn't that funny? No, I don't think so, but that's very psychological. I don't know. Isn't it funny how people see things that we don't when we write? Honestly, probably not. Because
funny and sometimes horrifying.
Yes, I'm very horrified.
If I ever commit a serious crime, I'm going to confess to it in a book somewhere down the road.
Right, it'll be in there. And all
so
the books
it's better not a committee.
Yeah.
It